So we're up to 71 participants, so we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining us for our first CCIM monthly meeting of 2021, and this is indeed in the virtual format. My name is Samantha Harris. I am your president for the CCIM Houston Gulf Coast chapter for the year of 2021. So I will be moderating our presentation today with Patrick Jankowski with the Greater Houston Partnership. But before turning over the mic to Patrick, I'll do a few commercials and cover some housekeeping items to set our parameters for our meeting today. So the first commercial is for our magnificent partners. I know Ginger, is sharing the names of our partners on a slide, as we're beginning our program today. And we do want to invite each and every one of the members to note the names and to utilize their services. We are working on some creative videos. I know Andrew Wynn is heading up our partners committee this year. So Andrew is going to be helping us with some creative videos to share more information about our partners so you can learn what they do and how they can help you to be successful in your business. The second commercial I want to do is reminding everyone about our upcoming forecast competition. It is scheduled for Thursday, February the 18th from 8 a.m. to noon. That's Thursday, February the 18th from 8 a.m. to noon. It's going to be in a hybrid format, so it's very different from past years. Our panelists and the maximum number of attendees as allowed by the governmental guidelines will be at Norris Conference Center at City Center. And then the other attendees will attend virtually via a Zoom meeting like you're seeing here. Dr. Mark Dotzer, the former chief economist from Texas A&M University, will be the virtual keynote speaker. And we'll have a great lineup of competitors in office, retail, land, industrial, medical, and multifamily real estate sectors. It is the Who's Who event of the year, so if you haven't been, just know that everyone who's anyone is going to be there in attendance and present, and you're not going to want to miss what the experts think is going to happen for the year 2021, so don't miss it. You can go to our website right now and sign up to reserve your spot. And then the last of our commercials is just making sure, as you know, CCIM is all about our education. We do have already scheduled the market analysis class, the CI 102 class, which will be March the 2nd through the 5th. Our investment analysis class, we're still working on dates to schedule. User decision analysis is CI 103 is June 22nd through the 25th. And the financial analysis 101 class is December 30th through December 3rd. And last of all, housekeeping items. As everyone has been joining, we talked about using the chat button at the bottom of your screen to network, to socialize with your fellow colleagues out there, because we are all about networking. But if you do have a question for Patrick, please use the Q&A button, because your question might get lost in all the chat, going on in the chat field. So please use the Q&A button for questions, and we'll try to make sure we get that question addressed. So now for our featured guest, Patrick Jankowski. He is the regional economist and senior vice president of research of the Greater Houston Partnership. Jankowski has worked with the Greater Houston Partnership and its predecessor, the Houston Chamber of Commerce, for 35 years. Lots of knowledge here. He oversees the research department, which provides data analysis, economic forecasting, and mapping functions for the partnership. His observations and analysis on the local region and U.S. economic trends have appeared in over 35 newspapers, magazines, radio, and television broadcasts. He's the president of the Houston Economics Club, board member of the National Association of Business Economics, and a past board member of the Council for Community and Economic Research. Prior to working as an economist, he worked as a business writer for the Houston Magazine, Houston City Magazine, Houston Engineer, and Houston Business Journal, or HBJ. Holds a certificate of energy certificate from the University of Texas McCombs School of Business, and he received his bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Texas at Austin, same as me. So now turning over the mic to Patrick, to give us the much awaited economic update. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Samantha. And let me go ahead and share my screen so I can get my slides up. Okay, Samantha, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, very good. It's in these virtual worlds, we always worry that people aren't going to be able to see the slides. So I'm glad to see that they're up there. So I want to thank you, Samantha. I want to thank everybody at CCIM for allowing me to speak to you again. We were talking yesterday. God, I think maybe this might be the 10th time I've tried to share some insights on Houston's economy with the group. So I'm honored that you guys keep having me back. I want to let you know, if you look at the very bottom of the slide, you see our website. We've got the easiest web address in the world to remember. It's www.houston.org. If you want to find out more about the partnership, you can go there. But also, we put out a forecast in December, very detailed on every industry. If you go to the partnership's website and you simply use the search function and put in forecast, you can call up a copy of that forecast. I'm going to give you some additional details, actually probably a lot more details than I'm giving you here because there's only so much I can cover in 45 minutes. So let's go ahead and I want to get started. So let's start with this. Let's start with where we are with the COVID virus, the coronavirus. And you can see it right here. This is for the US. You can see over 3.1 million cases have been reported so far. Almost 230,000 were active in January 12th. You can look at the number of deaths. We're approaching close to 400,000 deaths in the US. There were 4,400 on January 12th. What's disturbing, if you see all those trends for the number of cases, the number of deaths, the number of people who have been hospitalized are on their way up. So let me see, go back. Guys, this is my first presentation of the new year, so my fingers are still a little rusty, so you may see some things pop up. But this is what it looks like for Harris County. The number of cases over the last 14 days have actually gone up 55%. Almost 270,000 total reported cases. Deaths are up 88%. We've had close to 3,700 people die in Harris County. So to kind of put that in perspective, since January of last year, at least 1 in every 18 people who live in Harris County have been infected with the COVID-19 virus. And at least 1 in every 1,288, 1 in almost every 1,300 who lived in Harris County have died from the virus. Kind of puts it in perspective, thinking 1 in 18. So if we were there in the room and you have 180 people in the room, at least 10 people in the room would have been affected with the virus. Now, that's Harris County. It's the most populous county. I did this, maybe you don't live in Harris County, maybe you live in one of the surrounding counties. So it kind of gives you some idea of how prevalent it is in one of the counties that you surround. You can look in Austin County, 1 in 23 residents of Austin County have come down with it. There've been 15 deaths, like 1 death out of every 2,000 people. You jump to Fort Bend County, the most populous after Harris, almost 42,000 cases. It's 1 in 20 people in Fort Bend County have come down with it. They've had 417 deaths. And it's like 1 in every 2,000 people who lived in Fort Bend County have died from the virus. So it kind of gives you some perspective that it's, this time last year, this is something we were hearing about going on in China. Now it's something which is definitely controlling our economy. By the way, I'm going to send a PDF of these slides to Ginger, and she'll share it with you guys afterwards so you can have the details here. So how have we responded to the virus? We responded by shutting things down. I mean, we hear about the surge in the hospitals. We hear about the people dying. You hear about, there's a story on the news this morning I was listening to, and it said some people are having to wait 6 weeks to have a funeral for their loved one who passed away because the funeral homes are just so overwhelmed. So what we tried to do is control the rate of infection. We've tried to control the number of deaths by shutting things down. And that had a very serious impact on the US economy. And when we shut down back in the first quarter last year and into the second quarter, we saw a loss of GDP of almost $2 trillion. We saw 22.2 million jobs lost in the US and 140,000 businesses closed in the US. This was one of the worst, if not the worst downturn since the Great Depression. One of the challenges is the data keeping was different then than it is now, but probably not quite as deep and not quite as many people have lost their jobs, but it has been a significant impact on the U.S. economy. If you want to look at the way it plays out for GDP, you can see the loss at the end of the first quarter and into the second quarter. And we had a bit of a pickup in the third quarter, but not enough to make up everything we lost in the first 2 quarters of last year. We don't have fourth quarter data out. It should be out pretty soon, and we'll see how we've done. But still, the economy has not recovered and output-wise from where we were prior to the pandemic. If you want to look at the number of jobs, we've recouped roughly 12.2 million of the jobs we've lost. We've gotten back about a little over half the jobs we've lost. But there's still about 9.9 million jobs short of where we were in February prior to the pandemic. So think about that. That's close to 10 million people who were working in February who still have not found work. And this is just what's referred to as payroll employment, people who are collecting a paycheck. This doesn't include gig workers or the self-employed. And Yelp data, it shows that 60% of the businesses that closed during the virus pandemic are now closed permanently. So the coronavirus, COVID-19, has had just an extremely severe impact on the US economy as we tried to shut things down to prevent the virus from spreading. So the question is, how bad did things get in Houston? Because we shut down in Houston as well. I think the watershed moment was when we shut down the rodeo, because we realized it was beginning to spread. And it looks like, everyone's trying to figure out how far into 2021 can they postpone things. The rodeo's trying to postpone, and OTC's been postponed. The World Energy Conference is going to be rescheduled. Even the quilt show, which normally takes place at the George R. Brown in the spring, it's been postponed. They're going to hopefully try to do one in October. But to give you some idea, Houston lost 350,000 jobs. It is just absolutely severe. You can see right there, each one of those bars represents a month of employment. And you can see in March, and we didn't start to shut down until mid-March, so we lost close to 20,000 jobs in March, another 330,000 in April. And when we came back, we hoped that we would come back fairly strong, but you can look, and it doesn't take a whole lot of math to see that these green bars here just don't anywhere add up to the red bar here. This July loss, that's something that happens every July. It's very cyclical. It relates to colleges and universities and school districts and so forth, where people aren't on campus or aren't in class. And so a lot of administrators and educators on something less than a 12-month contract show up in the July numbers. But that's where we are for job losses. If you want to look at how the COVID recession compares to the last two recessions, the last two really big ones, you can see the oil bust of the 80s. It's where I cut my teeth. And I started studying this economy actually in March of 1981. I had one good year before things started to go to hell back in the 80s. But you can see the oil 80 bust of the Great Recession, which we thought was pretty severe. Was it nearly as bad? And if you stack the last two big recessions on top of each other, they still don't come up to the level of job losses that we saw with the COVID recession. They still fall short. If you want to look at the unemployment rate for the Houston metropolitan area, it peaked in April at 14.3%. You can see that during the oil bust, the worst the unemployment rate got up to, and that was June, I think, of 86, got up to 12.9%. If you look at the Great Recession, the unemployment rate never got above 8.7%. So you can see whether you're counting it by jobs or by the number of people who are unemployed, just how severe the COVID recession was. If you want to look at the PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index, I know you guys should be familiar with this because I've used it in every presentation I've ever given to you guys. But if you want to look at the PMI, you can see it here on the screen. The PMI is a survey done of purchasing managers around the region. And the Institute for Supply Management asks a series of questions about backlogs and sales and employment and prices paid and inventory, crunches all these numbers and comes up with an index. And whenever that index is above 50, that's a sign the economy in general is expanding. It can be below 50, it can be above 45, and the service side will be expanding, but it needs to be above 50 for both services and manufacturing to be expanding. And you can look here and you can see we were with the Great Recession, how it fell down to 39.1. This is the fracking bust here that you can see there. You can see Hurricane Harvey's impact there. And then here you see the COVID. The Houston economy is measured by the Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, fell to its lowest level of activity in April because of the virus. So as I said, you're going to see some things show up because this is my first presentation of the year. So if you look at the average price of crude in April was $16.55. Yes, it went briefly below zero for one day. That was a result of contracts expiring and people who were traders not wanting to take physical possession of it. But $16.55, you could see how that figures out. We were trading close to $60 a barrel at the end of the year. You know, part of the reason why it was trading close to $60 at the end of the year was Saudi Arabia was trying to do the IPO for Aramco, and they were trying to get the price up because that would get the value of their stock up. But and then we had this in February and early March, we had a price war going on between Saudi Arabia and Russia over who was going to dominate and control the market. And then they realized that neither of them had any control of the market because everything had shut down, and you can see how the price of oil fell. And then it's improved somewhat. And I asterisk January 21 because it's just for the first 10 days of the month, trading around $50 a barrel. Let's hope it stays at 50. Hopefully get up a little bit more because 50 is right about the break-even point for the oil and gas industry in the U.S. They're not making a lot of money. They're not losing a lot of money. We really needed to be above 50, but when it's below 50, hardly anyone's making any money. Let's go and look at the next slide. Passenger traffic, HAS, Houston Airport System, traffic in April, only about 250,000 people flew through the airport system. You can look and see how April of 2020 compares to previous Aprils. Now, we should have been handling close to 5 million people through the Houston Airport System in April. And as it is, we handle less than 250,000. If you want to look at hotel occupancy and how that played out in April, only 25% of the available rooms were occupied. If you want to look at how that compares, in February, and we were at 65% occupancy. March, we started to shut down mid-March, and you still haven't seen it get above 50. In the hotel business, I don't know if there's anybody in CCIM who manages a hotel or hotel property, but in the hotel business, you need to have your occupancy rate above 60%. Actually, you want it above 65, 66% to be making any money. And so the hotels still aren't making money. Maybe you saw the story that appeared yesterday or the day before. I'm sorry, I forget the exact name of the hotel. It's the one by Midway. It's near Green Street downtown. That's shutting down because occupancy is so low. So you're not going to see hotel occupancy pick up until you start to see people travel again. And if you actually look at the International Air Transport Association, IATA, they're saying they're not expecting air traffic to get back to pre-pandemic levels until 2014. So you're going to be seeing these hotels struggling for a while. So if you want to look at retail sales, there was a nearly 14% drop in retail sales in April. Here, this is Houston Metro retail sales and the quarter. I said in April, I meant for the quarter. If you want to look at where they were in Q2 20 versus Q2 19. And what I've highlighted here is you can see the drop in motor vehicle sales. You can see the drop in home furnishings, the drop in electronics and appliances. I'm not sure why that fell so much, since everybody was home and everybody needed a laptop or a better TV, because that's all we were doing, is either working or watching Netflix. If you look at sales in gas stations and so forth, how much they dropped off. So let me go back to this. If you want to look at who did well, the ones that did well were building materials, because everybody was finally getting around to those projects that promised their spouse that they would finally get that deck built or the floor in the attic or whatever he or she wanted. I see food and beverage, that was that surge in grocery sales because everyone was staying home, no one was eating out. And the sports hobby bookstores, people, there was a time when you'd walk into a place like the bookstore, and there'd be no puzzles on the shelf because everybody was working puzzles. And even if you tried to order them online, they were out. So where are we now? Where is Houston now? Well, things have gotten better. Great headline in the Chronicle this morning. Maybe you saw it. It was the article that was written by Catherine Frazier saying that Houston home sales hit records in 2020. So some parts of the economy are doing fairly well. I want to see, maybe you can see, I'm trying to do this, the headline. Some parts of the economy are doing well. Some parts are still struggling, but those 350,000 jobs that we lost, we have through November gotten back a little over 200,000 of them. So it leaves us only about 147,000 short. Now I need to let you know, this shows great progress, but we need to be careful and not get too excited about this because we saw, before I get to my next slide, you can see, so where we are recouped, we're still missing about 42% of the jobs we've lost. We've recouped roughly about 58%. And that's as of November. But I need to let you know that November was, let me back up. November was a good year. November, a good month. It was better than most Novembers are. Part of that is what you see, the seasonal hiring that takes place. And also it has to deal with the COVID recovery. But we saw in the US a reported loss of 142,000 jobs in December. And if the US as a whole is losing jobs, we're probably going to see some job losses in December for Houston. But what also you need to know that is in January every year, we always see significant job losses. And we will probably see a loss of between 40 and 50,000 jobs when we get to January numbers. We won't get those numbers till February. And if we see a loss of 40,000 jobs, that's going to put us back to still needing to recoup between 190 and 200,000 jobs. Now, the reason we see job losses in January is, well, part of it is there's always seasonal hiring for the Christmas holidays. The stores take on additional help for the Christmas sales. The transportation sector surges. It didn't surge at the airports, but the couriers, you always see that FedEx and UPS take on additional workers. They'll let those people go in January. You see temporary or contract workers, the employment services sector surge as people bring on contract workers to try to handle the projects need to get out the door before the end of the year. And also decisions that were made to restructure. No one wants to lay anybody off before Christmas or around Thanksgiving. And so layoffs or firings that should have taken place in November, December that have been postponed take place in January. So we will see job losses in January. And even if it's only a job loss of 40,000, which would be at the low end, that would put us back to being short about 190,000 jobs of where we were prior to the pandemic. So we still have a ways to go. But we have seen recovery in a number of sectors. You can see professional, scientific, and technical services, white collar work. We've recovered all the jobs we've lost there. Finance and insurance. Part of it is all the effort to process and manage these PPP loans. Part of it is this refinancing surge that we're seeing out there. Part of it is the population still continues to grow. People still need insurance. Utilities only lost about 200 jobs, and I think that's just probably a rounding error. I put the asterisk by transportation and warehousing and retail because that's what I told you. It looks like we've recovered all the jobs, but that's because of the surge in hiring that takes place in October and November as those two sectors ramp up for the holiday season. And then once the holiday season's over and people have returned their packages and they aren't shipping quite as much, you'll start to see job losses and those will sink back below 100%. You can look at these other sectors that made some good progress. Excuse me. I had to take a sip of Ozarka to keep my vocal cords from drying up. Educational services, that's private sector education. And that picked back up as people return to school. My wife is a Catholic school teacher and they're all back in. They only have, she said they're doing both virtual and in class. And she says she has 5 times as many students in class as the ones who are doing it virtual. Administrative support services, that's where the contract workers fall in, healthcare and social assistance. One reason why that hasn't fully recovered is because you need to look at those last 2 words in that title, social assistance. And that's where daycares fall. You saw a lot of daycares which shut down early in the pandemic and haven't opened back up. You saw parents reluctant to send their kids to daycare. Asterisk by the restaurants and bars. Part of that will drop off after the holidays, and part of it is we're going to see some additional closings as we keep on having these high infection rates. And then you get over to this recovery, arts, entertainment, and recreation. No one's going to the concert. No one's sitting in NRG Stadium. No one's, not as many people are going to the gym. And so that's the reason why you see this dropped off. Hotels, I talked about, construction remains weak. And the government sector, that's where public education falls. And they're not back to where they were back in February. You see wholesale trade so dependent upon manufacturing. Manufacturing is so dependent upon energy in this town. And so those are the sectors that have recovered very few of their jobs or none of their jobs. And if you want to look at unemployment, we had this nice long run where unemployment in Houston was around 4%. And now it looks like it's fairly consistently above 8%, close to 9%. It's 8.7 back in November. And so, yeah, things have improved, but we're nowhere near getting back to where we were back in February. So what's the outlook for 2021 for Houston? Now, that's what you guys want to know. What's 2021 going to look like? Well, it's going to look a lot better than 20. I mean, it's got to look a lot better than 20. But the outlook in 21 is going to be, if I could use a big word, it's going to be bifurcated. It's going to look different. You know, the first half of 21 is going to look like this, still kind of beat up. The second half of 21 is going to look more like that. You're going to see a big difference in the first half of the year and the second half of the year. And that's for a couple of reasons. For one thing, we still haven't got the virus under control. And as Fauci said, you know, things are going to get worse as we have this new daily death record. And you're probably going to see some more restaurants pullbacks and bar closure. Well, the bars I think are already closed, but you're going to see some scaling back. You're not going to see hiring. You're not going to see investment. And until we get the virus under control, the economy is kind of in a stasis mode. We're not going to be growing very much at all because people are reluctant to make investment decisions and to hire and so forth. You know, right now, COVID controls everything. You know, Congress can give us additional stimulus. It is a shot in the arm, but until we can get the virus under control and growth start occurring organically rather than the US government pumping money into it, we're not going to see the significant growth that we need to see to make up for the nearly 200,000 jobs we're still short of in Houston and the 10 million in the US. You know, the first half of the year is also going to depend a lot on this guy right here. See how well he performs. What are the things he does? He's got so many issues he has to deal with. He's got to deal with the virus. He's got to deal with the weak economy. He's got to deal with the cybersecurity attack. He's got to deal with impeachment now. And it's going to be a while. Some people are going to be sitting on the sidelines waiting to see what sort of president is he going to be. And some are going to be sitting on the sidelines waiting for that additional stimulus package or see what sort of regulations are out there. And then it's really going to depend upon the vaccine. You know, we have not had a very successful rollout with the vaccine. And we need to get a huge segment of the population vaccinated so we start to see the rate of infection go down so the economy can start opening back up. So people will feel comfortable going back in the office. People will feel comfortable getting in airplanes. People will feel comfortable going out in public again. I mean, we're having this virtually because people are still nervous about going out and being in large crowds. So what's going to happen? We're going to start to see some significant improvement, and that's in my forecast. I think we're going to start to see some significant improvement around mid-year. You know, this first quarter is really going to be pretty rough as we continue to see this increase in cases. We're still trying to figure out how to get more people vaccinated. We're still trying to figure the rollout. And we're still going to, you know, struggle. You know, the cost, hopefully we're going to see by the end of the first quarter, most healthcare workers will be vaccinated. And then you're going to start seeing inoculations begin on the general population. Right now, the only people in the general population are those over 65, are those with health issues. You know, in Houston, it is a sizable chunk of the population, those over 65, but it's only about 11%. The Houston population is over 65. So right now, only 11%. And let's throw those in with health conditions. I'm just pulling this number out of the air, maybe 4 or 5%. So right now, only about 15% of the population in Houston is eligible for the vaccination, and then they're still not able to get it. But hopefully by the end of the first quarter, we'll start seeing the general population getting vaccinated, and we'll start to see COVID cases trending down. In the second quarter, we'll start to see some of the stimulus packages bearing fruit. The rest of the world will start getting some control over the virus. We'll start to see global growth kicking in. We'll start to see a pickup in demand for U.S. exports, but we're not going to see a significant growth in the U.S. economy until these things happen. And we're not going to see growth in Houston's economy until we start to see growth in the U.S. economy, because we're so much more tied. We're not going to get any help from the oil and gas industry this time. I mean, that's what helped us come out of the Great Recession so quickly, because we had something called the Eagle Ford Shale and a drilling boom there. Now Houston's recovery is going to be dependent upon the U.S. recovery. But by the beginning of the third quarter, we're going to start to see some pent-up demand unleashed. We're going to start to be business projects that were put on hold restarted. We're going to start to see travel resume. I mean, we have on my team, we have kind of a happy hour on Fridays just to kind of check in and find out how my research team, how things went. And I said, is there anything you guys want to talk about on this Friday? And they said, yeah, let's all have a brief conversation about where we want to travel as soon as we can. So there's a lot of pent up demand. There's pent up demand to go to the restaurants and bars. There's pent up demand, I guess, to go see the Rockets. I don't know why, but there are people who do want to go out. And so once people feel safe, you are going to see a surge in demand, but you're not going to see that until we get the vaccine under control. And my forecast is we'll probably start to see that surge in demand happen sometime after the second quarter, which means sometime in July, maybe as early as June, but it's not going to happen until we start to see those vaccinations. So how many jobs will we create in Houston? Well, my forecast calls for between 35 and 52,000. And it all depends upon the success of the vaccine rollout. If we're still struggling with the vaccine rollout in the second quarter, that's going to push that pent-up demand back to the third or further in the third or into the fourth quarter. If we have a successful vaccine rollout, we'll see about 52,000 jobs, but we're not going to see any jobs in January and very little in February and March until we start to get this under control. Yeah, how does that fit? The long-term average for Houston, or the range, is normally we create between 60 and 70,000 jobs a year. That's when growth isn't being juiced by high oil prices or pulled down by low oil prices. So it'll be a little bit less than normal, but it'll still be, if we created 52,000 jobs this year, that would be a pretty good year. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe it'll be higher than that, but it's not going to be any higher if we can't get the virus under control. So this kind of shows you where I think the job growth is going to occur, that administrative support services, and that's also where contract workers fall. That's also where security guards fall. That's where housekeepers fall. I mean, with the offices, so few offices occupied, you're not going to, when we start to get back to occupying the offices, you're going to start seeing a more demand for those services. When business picks up, you always see a pickup in contract workers because employers are reluctant to take people on full time permanently until they know that the demand is real and it's going to be there. Healthcare will continue to grow. Restaurants and bars will pick up. Now, I was criticized by one of my peers for not having more job growth in restaurants and bars. I may be off there, but part of the problem is we've lost over 1,000 restaurants and bars in Houston during the pandemic. So I don't know where these workers are going to go to work because their former employer simply isn't there. I mean, the institution Luby's is shutting down. Golly, where am I going to go to get my trout almondine or my green jello? I mean, maybe we'll start to see some restaurants pick up, some new openings, but they're just, so many businesses have shut down. The places for people to go back to work just aren't there. You're going to see transportation, warehousing, and utilities. That's going to be very dependent upon what happens with manufacturing. Construction, I'll talk about that. We're so overbuilt on the commercial side, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We're not going to see much of a pickup in construction. And you can see the other sectors there. And I expect we're going to continue to see job losses in energy and job losses in retail. My concern is I have not forecasted deep enough job losses in energy or retail. When I put my forecast together at the end of November, and then we started hearing of additional job losses. So we may see more there as well. So, but Houston still faces challenges. We will have growth in 2021, or I should say, we will have recovery. Technically, you don't hit growth until you've recovered everything you've lost. We will have recovery in 21. We will add jobs. There will be space leased. We will have restaurants open, but we're going to have things that we have to deal with. And that part of it is the world is still oversupplied with oil. I mean, we're still consuming about 7 million barrels a day less than we were consuming prior to the pandemic. And so that's one reason why the U.S. rig count remains so weak. It's still below where it was at the worst part of the fracking bust. And with so few rigs working, there's not the demand for replacement rigs or replacement parts. That's going to impact manufacturing. With so few rigs working, you need fewer people back in Houston supervising the operations. That's going to affect the white collar jobs. This is refinery capacity utilization. I'm using this now rather than trying to put a chart up saying global oil demand, because what this tells you just how much the refiners are running at a lot lower capacity than they were prior to the pandemic, because there's no demand for refined products. And until capacity utilization gets back up close to 90%, you're not going to see that pickup in demand. And you won't see that pickup in drilling because the demand just isn't there. You can look at the future price of oil. Yes, right now it's above 50, just barely. But if you look at the future strip, it's not showing it staying above 50 for long and maybe getting down to the mid 40s. And so we're going to continue to have weakness in oil and gas. Okay. So the office market is overbuilt, and the industrial market, and the multifamily market. And give you some idea just how bad the industrial market is overbuilt. You can look at this right here, and you can see that in 2020, we delivered 30 million square feet, and we had a record for absorption. We absorbed 14 million square feet, but we only absorbed half of what we delivered. And right now, there's 54 million square feet of vacant industrial and industrial warehouse space out there. If you want to look at the Class A vacancy rate, it's 18.6% right now. It was 12.5%. When you have the vacancy rate increased by 50%, I know that's a percent of a percent. Let's say the vacancy rate goes up 6% in 1 year. That tells me there's a lot more Class A space out there than the market needs, that the market can absorb. Luckily, we're seeing construction of industrial warehouse space winding down. There's only about 8 million under construction right now, but it's going to take us a couple years to absorb some of this Class A industrial warehouse space. If you want to look at the office market, this is total available space. God, it's the way things are calculated. There's available space, there's direct space, there's direct vacant space. But if you simply look at everything available that's direct, that's vacant, that's available for sublease, and look at where we were at the end of the year for the last 5 years, and it's higher now than it has been back in 16, and I thought 16 was a pretty bad year. So we have much more office space we need out there. I know there's an announcement of a building that's going to go up near Discovery Green. It's great that they have a prime Class A tenant, but and I really wouldn't be anybody wanting to start an office building unless I get at least 45 or 50% of it pre-leased, because we're going to have a huge amount of office space available for quite some time. If you want to talk about the healthcare sector, the healthcare sector right now they're dealing with this issue of just so many people who are underinsured. If you go back and you want to look, we have one of the lowest insurance rates in the nation. If you look at the 50 largest U.S. metropolitan areas, and you look at the percentage of the population that has health insurance, Houston ranks dead last. It's only 80% of the population is covered by health insurance. It's 1 in 5. And if you consider most people in Houston get their health insurance through their employer, and we have close to 200,000 people out of work, I imagine the unemployed rate will go up, which means there's going to be more pressure on the hospital systems to treat and deal with this financially. All these people are showing up for care that don't have insurance. Talk about the retail sector. It's in transition. If you want to look at a lot of bankruptcies, these are companies that have operations in Houston that declared bankruptcy in 2020. Some of them are just restructured. Some of it spaces are going to go empty, be put back on the market. Some of these big boxes. As I understand, you're seeing some of these discounters going into there, or maybe some gyms, but there's going to be a challenge for retail as well. And so much of our manufacturing is tied to the energy industry. There's a question that was asked by the Federal Reserve of energy executives in the district. And they asked them, do you think U.S. oil production has peaked? And this question was asked in the fall, and 2/3 of the energy executives think U.S. oil production has peaked. So if we're at peak oil production, what does that mean for manufacturing in Houston? At least the 40% of manufacturing in Houston, which is tied to oil and gas. So production's peaked, and if you want to look at what's happened in Houston, employment in the oil and gas sector has definitely peaked. This is a chart that I put together and includes exploration, production, oil field services, oil field equipment manufacturing, pipes, valves, and flanges, and engineering. Those sectors that most of us kind of recognize as being part of upstream energy in Houston. And it peaked in December of 2014, and we had a little bit of an improvement back in 19, but you can see it's been trending down as well. And if you look at employment in energy in Houston, it's lower than it was in January 2010. You have to almost go back to 2006 to have the same level of energy employment in Houston now as you did back then. So, that's a concern that we're still so tied to energy, and the energy industry outlook does not look very good. And there's another one, and Sam, I'm looking at my clock. I'm sorry, Sam, that was very familiar. Samantha, excuse me, Samantha. I'm looking at my clock. I know I'm going long. Please have patience. I'll stay on a little longer to answer questions. Population growth isn't quite as strong as we would like for it to be. You look at the very middle of the graph, and you can see those are some great boom years when we were adding 170,000 people a year. And you can look and see how it has trickled off or trended down. Part of it is, the number one thing which drives population growth in Houston, at least people moving here, is job growth. And we just haven't been creating jobs lately the way we have. And so that means there are fewer people moving here. But I want to go and show you a little bit more detail. This is a big chart with lots of numbers on it. It's hard to follow, so I'm going to walk you through it. That's domestic migration. That's people who moved here from somewhere else in the region. And it was pretty strong in 13, 14, and 15, but look at 17 and 18. We had more people leave Houston than moved here from somewhere else in the US. And in 19, we only had 7,000 people on net. This is a net number. You look at the people who move in, the people who move out, you get a net number. So for the metro region, 2 of the last 3 years, we've had net negative domestic migration. It's worse. For Harris County, we've had negative domestic migration for the last 4 years. So if it wasn't for this international migration, our population numbers would have looked a lot worse. But they've also slipped somewhat. Part of it is a job market, and part of it is the rhetoric coming out of Washington and the stricter immigration policies. And that is definitely have an impact on Houston's population growth. Now, if it wasn't for this right here, which is the natural increase, and the natural increase is you look at the number of births you have in a year, the number of deaths you have in the year, you subtract one from the other, and you come up with this. And we have roughly 100,000 births. We have roughly, it used to be 40,000 deaths, now it's a little higher. And you can see, so we're going to be so dependent on our population growth going forward on this natural rate of increase. So you're looking at over the last 10 years, let me go to the next one. You can see what's happened. Almost half our population increase has come from this natural increase, more babies being born than people dying. And roughly 30% has come from international, and only a fourth has come from domestic migration. And that's been because of these last few years. So yes, we're going to have population growth, but it's not quite the same as having 50,000 people with college degrees moving here in 13 and 14 versus what we're seeing now. So I just ask you to be real cautious when you talk about, well, Houston's going to do well because we have this strong population growth. But you need to look at the composition of the population growth, and you need to understand it's not anywhere near what it used to be. So who's going to carry the burden going forward in this economy? And we definitely have some challenges. Well, it's going to come from a couple areas. For one thing, we are pushing real hard for innovation. The partnership is working very hard in all these areas, guys. We have our annual meeting is coming up on the 26th. Anybody can attend. You can go to our website to sign up and find out what we're doing. And we have some sessions on the 27th talking about our push that we're trying to do for economic diversification, Energy 2.0. But we are working real hard on building the innovation part of our economy. I think Amazon turning their nose up at us 3 years ago was a wake-up call. And I think it's very fitting that the Midtown Fiesta is going, Greentown is going into the Midtown Fiesta. You know, Greentown Labs is a incubator for alternative energy projects based in Boston. And this is the very first location outside of Boston Greentown Labs is setting up in. And I just think it's very appropriate that they're going into Fiesta because, okay, I'll get this right eventually, guys. Oh gosh, okay. We were talking about earlier how, okay, I'm gonna do this. There you go. Love the technology, guys. Baylor College of Medicine, when it began, which is one of the anchors of the Texas Medical Center, began in an old Sears Roebuck. You know, so the precedent has been set for great things emerging from Houston from an abandoned retail space. No, gosh, you know, maybe I shouldn't say this. Maybe with some of this abandoned retail space, we'll see lots of good things coming out of it. But I just think it's great. Maybe it's great synergy or great poetry that a lot of what happened at the Texas Medical Center, it's tied to what happened going to Old Sears Roebuck. The other thing is, here I go again. I'm gonna have IT get me a new laptop. Let's try this one. Maybe so Hewlett Packard announced they're moving their headquarters to California. That's a great news. I mean, if you think of it, those of us who've been around for a while remember Compaq, which merged with Hewlett Packard and now come back. And I see a great parallel to this because we're already getting inquiries at the partnership about people asking about Houston and the innovation sector and its tech sector. And I'm going to go back even before I began studying the economy. And there's a parallel to this. I'd like to see, let's see if this is going to work this time. Yes, there you go. You see the cover of Texas Highways shot from Allen Parkway. And what you see there is One Shell Plaza in its construction stages. And if you look, that was November of 1970. Gosh, it's almost, 50 years to the day that we had the announcement. And Shell was in New York City, and they decided that they wanted to look all over the US and what would be the best place to relocate their headquarters. And they chose Houston. And a lot of other energy companies that were in New York or Chicago said, Houston, God, maybe we should take a look. And that was really when we had the big boom. We had over 200 divisional and corporate headquarters relocate to Houston in the 70s because in a way Shell was the bell cow, or it was the one that sent a signal out, said, hey guys, you need to look here. And I'm hoping that's going to be the same thing with a lot of these tech companies when they look at HP. And let's go to one other slide. And we are starting to see a lot of work with some of our venture capital funded organizations and our homegrown enterprises. So, you know, we are seeing some efforts towards diversification, but it is going to be a little bit of a struggle. So risk, there's always a risk to the forecast. There's always a risk to what I'm telling you guys. Risk was one of my favorite games in college. Unfortunately, I can't get my wife to play it anymore. She'd rather do something like Monopoly or watch Bridgerton or something like that. So the risk of the forecast, gosh, people need to wear their masks. We really need to get the COVID virus under control. I mean, if you want to know what's one of the most simple things you can do to help the economy recover, wear a mask and get a vaccine. Because right now the COVID virus is what's controlling everything we do economically. And the other is when you are available to get your shot, get your shot. I mean, that's one of my concerns. There's still a lot of skepticism out there. I mean, I had no choice when I was a kid. I had to get my polio vaccine, and I had to get my measles vaccine, and I had to get all those vaccines. I said chickenpox, I meant smallpox. You know, if we can get people wearing masks and we can get vaccinations, we can get the economy going back again, but we're not going to see growth until we start to get the virus under control. Have I said that enough, guys, about how important it is for us to get the virus under control? So with that, how many jobs will it create? Between 35 and 52. It's going to depend upon the success of the rollout and how soon we can unleash that pent-up demand. There is pent-up demand out there. Whether we release it in the third quarter or release it in the fourth is going to depend upon the vaccine. So with that, I want to say thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your patience. I will send a PDF of these slides back to CCIM, and then Ginger or Samantha or someone will distribute it. So with that, I'm done. I'm going to stop sharing. And at this point, Samantha, if you have any questions for me, I'll go ahead and answer them. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time.
I do. We have a few questions in the Q&A section. And by the way, you can always call me Sam. I know I have a lot of friends of mine, a lot of colleagues on the line, and they know Sam, Samantha, either way, it's all good.
Yeah, I didn't want to be too familiar.
No worries. So first question, Joe Nichols asks, is this net migration just for Harris County, or is it net migration for all of the counties?
The slide I showed you was net migration for all 9 counties.
Okay, thank you.
And let me back up. Harris County has had negative domestic migration. The last 4 years, it's had positive international migration. So there's some counties that have had positive domestic migration, but if you look at the region as a whole, 2 out of the last 3 years, this region as a whole has had more people move out than move in.
Yeah, and just looking at those numbers and knowing and being here in 2017 with Harvey, I'm wondering if just the drama and the fear of Harvey is the reason why a lot of people moved out over the next few years, but I don't know if we have.
Well, you have to look at the way the data is gathered. 2017 wasn't Harvey. 2017 was the tail end of the fracking bust.
Okay.
Because the way the population is measured, it's measured from July to July. So that was the end of 16, the beginning of 17. So those were people who said, I've tried for 2 years to find a job. I can't find one. I'm going somewhere else. 2018 was the result of Hurricane Harvey hitting at the end of 2017. And people saying, I've got a place in the hill country. I might as well go there. Or I'm not going to live in a place that seems like it floods every 6 months.
Makes sense. So, and then, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Next question is, how about the multifamily market? Any kind of thoughts on new construction and absorption in that market?
I debated whether to put a slide in there. I probably should have. Multifamily is overbuilt as well. And if you look at the last time I looked at the data for multifamily, the occupancy rate was around 89.8%, real close to 90%. And 90% is supposed to be that magical number where it's a balanced market where, you know, above 90%, the landlord has control, below 90%, the tenant, it's a tenant favorable market. Well, it's right at 90%, but what you have to step back and look at how many units have an incentive attached to them. And about 65% of all Class A units have some sort of incentive attached to them to get them leased up or stay leased. And in normal market, it would be less than 30%. So we managed to keep the occupancy up by buying down the rent, by waiving deposits, by offering free rent, by giving them an upgrade, giving them a two-bedroom apartment for the rent of a 1-bedroom. And so we're still seeing the multifamily market, we're starting to see it slow down a little bit, but it is also, and that's the reason why my construction forecast for construction employment is weak, because we are starting to see some slowdown in construction in all 3 areas, but we're still overbuilt in multifamily, warehouse, industrial, and office.
Thank you. And then I have a question here that asks, does the partnership have any public campaigns planned to show the tie between getting the virus under control and the economic recovery of Houston? And this individual says, based on my property tours, the business community seems resistant to masks, virus, etc.
When you say, do we have a plan? Part of this is what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to let people know how important it is to get it done. We are working with that. If you go to our website, we have guidelines on how to do this. We're developing plans. We will be talking about it at the annual meeting and in those seminars that are going to take place the day after the annual meeting, which you go to our website and you can sign up. You don't have to be a member to sign up. So yes, we are working on that. I can understand the resistance, but when you look at the data and say 1 in 18 people in Harris County has come down with it, and we're seeing the level of cases rise. If I made this presentation a month from now, I wouldn't be surprised if I was telling you something like 1 in 12 people have come down with it. I myself know probably at least 10 or 20 people. I know of 2 people who have died from it. One was a neighbor, one was a relative of a coworker. Actually, I know 3 people have died of it.
Sorry. And we're up on noon, but I have one more question in the Q&A section. It looked like 2 questions came in the chat box. So for those of you who have to drop off, thank you for joining us. And Patrick, if you can stay on a little bit longer, I'd love to be able to answer all these questions right
Sure.
here. Possible.
Be glad to.
Great. And we're going to cut it off from that because I know others may think of other questions to ask. And if there are, just let us know. We're happy to try to get those questions to Patrick to answer them offline. So next question, do you think the lack of energy's prominence helps Houston attract more tech or just new businesses?
I need to think about how you worded that question. The lack of energy's prominence. Energy still is very prominent. And that's one of the issues we deal with at the partnership is people still see this as an energy town. But I did some analysis of what the economy looks like. I want to say it was in the August or September newsletter. You can go to the partnership's website and you can access the newsletter. You want to look for the newsletter, Economy at a Glance. And it was either the August or September one. And if you look at total GDP for Houston, energy only accounts for between 20 and 25% now, when just a few years ago it accounted for over 40%. So energy is still real prominent. That's one of the images we have of Houston. I mean, that the people, that businesses have of Houston, and that it is strictly an energy town. And it's one of the issues we're trying to do. The thing is, energy, though, is still very technically involved. There's so much technology involved in it. And that's one of the areas, one of the growing areas where you're going to see employment grow in the energy areas. It's data analytics, trying to understand more what's going on. If you look at some of the surveys out there, there's, I want to say it's the organization CompTech. There's an organization out there which tries to do the assessment of the size of the tech sectors in all the major economies in the US, and they try to count up tech workers. And when they did the analysis for Houston, Houston actually has a higher number of tech workers than Austin does, by virtue of the fact that our economy is so much larger. Austin's economy is 1/5 our size, but because it's so small, the tech workers are denser, and so it seems like it's a higher performance. But most of the tech workers we have don't work in a cool app that shows up on your iPhone. The tech workers we have work in the med center, or they work in the energy industry, or they work in engineering or construction somewhere. And that's one of the things we've been trying to do at the partnership, is get the message out there and let those who are in innovative sectors, who are in these companies, know that there is a large workforce here. It's just not as obvious because they work in support. They're working in direct applications as opposed to something which shows up on an iPhone.
Great, thank you. That's interesting. The last question here in the Q&A box is, are there any indicators that many of these jobs will remain remote? If so, how will that affect the economy and the commercial real estate industry here?
What I expect we're probably going to see is a hybrid situation. Early on, people talked about, it's great, I'm getting so much work done, I'm not having any interruptions. And now I'm hearing people say they miss the collisions they would have in the office where they'd bump into somebody. And because they bumped into somebody, they learn about a project, or they learn about a client visit or something like that. It was so great because you weren't interrupted. You could get your analytic work done, but every time I need to meet with someone, I have to schedule a call. I can't just walk down the hall, stick my head in Bethany's door and say, Bethany, you have 5 minutes. I just want to run something by you. So what I suspect we're going to see is a hybrid situation where you spend part of your time at home and part of the time in the office. I don't know what that does for an office footprint. I can't see myself sharing a desk with someone else because it's concerned. I think I will always have my own desk. And what we'll probably do is work this out to where everyone knows where meetings are scheduled for when you're in the office. And you might have some days of intense meetings in the office, and then you go home and you work on what you discussed. But what that means is, I don't know what it's going to mean for office. I really don't know. It's going to have an impact on in downtown, on the restaurants and the tunnels. They're not going to have nearly as many people eating out, or any of the restaurants or the fast food places that are cater to the lunch crowds. It's going to have an impact on them. The other thing is, if you do come back to the office and you want everybody in the office, people are going to be concerned about density, and they're not going to be sitting quite as close. I had a coworker raise an issue with me. Her desk is on the pathway to the bathroom. Everybody walks by her desk so she's not real comfortable with that. She said, who would I talk to about moving to another part of the office? So there's so many things we have not thought through that we're not aware of that we're going to deal with. But I do think we're going to have I don't think, in some cases you might have businesses which are 100% remote, but I really think what we're going to do is have a hybrid situation. Mm-hmm. And that's going to evolve, because we'll just see how it evolves over time.
We have two more questions, and if I can indulge, Patrick, are you still okay with time?
Sure. If I'm providing value, I'm glad to stay on. So.
Well, I'm learning a lot, so I appreciate it. Hope everybody else is too. So the second to the last question: do you see more companies utilizing malls or large 1-2-story buildings to create a reuse, to address needing more space between individuals and to avoid the use of elevators?
It's interesting. I've seen that discussion in the media and in the papers and so forth. I'm not sure whether a hybrid situation would work. I think for those of us who have been around for, I remember Westwood Mall and how it was ill-conceived from the start, but it seems like it's made a fairly decent transition to being other purpose. There's always ample parking there. I've heard people talking about using them for distribution centers, converting some of the big boxes to condos and so forth. I think what you're going to see is malls probably become focus more and more on being some sort of entertainment venue. And the entertainment and we've already got that somewhat. When you have an ice skating rink, I'm thinking of Memorial City, you've got an ice skating rink, you've got a movie theater, you've got a kids play area. I'm trying to think, what else can they do to bring people in? And they become truly mixed use. And maybe there will be some people who will want to have a condo sitting on the mall. I mean, I don't. I want my privacy. So, but there's that's another area that we're still going to see, and I see it going more towards mixed use, some sort of entertainment, multi-purpose, than being, and maybe distribution if the anchor is on the end of the parking lot, not if the anchor sat in the very middle. But once you do that, it just looks a lot different when people come to your mall and they see all these 18-wheelers pulling up, or all these step vans. It does not look the same. It does not have the same feel.
Yeah, and from a property management standpoint, that brings on a whole host of other things too, right? So,
well, yeah, the needs of your tenants are very different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So our last question, do you believe we have made reasonable progress on new flood control measures since Harvey? And I'm gonna add a little bit to that. In a coming attraction, we are working on getting a guest speaker, I think in June, to speak to our membership just about that, the new flood control measures. So just a coming attraction to put on your calendar. But Patrick, your thoughts on that?
Okay, let me put a caveat in there. I hate to admit I don't know what my organization's official position is. And what I'd like to be able to do is respond to you. This is the official position of the partnership, but I don't know that. But I will let everybody on the call know I live in the energy corridor. So my answer is no, we've not made enough progress.
Fair. That's good. You've an eyewitness empirical research there. So that's great. So, okay. Well, thank you so much and staying in overtime. And I know we've had lots of folks drop off, and understandably so, we went in overtime, but very enlightening, very good. And Patrick, I know me as an optimist, I wrote down the different positive things that you shared with the team members that can help with, you know, navigating the year and looking at hopefully, you know, I'm showing here third quarter, some pent-up demand which should be unleashed. So hopefully we'll see more positive things going. I have a cruise planned for the fall, and so I'm hoping that that means that that's going to be all good and I can actually go on it. But
Sam, if there's one thing everybody needs to take away, there is pent-up demand out there, and it will be significant. The question is when will it be released? And that depends. The timing of the pent-up demand being released depends upon how soon we can get the keep on saying vaccine, get the virus under control.
Understood. Very good. Well, thank you very much. So thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for calling in, attending some great questions. And we'll look forward to seeing everyone February the 18th for our forecast competition. And meanwhile, everyone stay safe, stay well, and we will see you next time. Take care. Bye.